Hello, my name is Ilina and I'm a 17-year-old student of the Shriram School, Aradni. I'm here because I wrote a book called The Gutsy Girls of Science. This book focuses on the Indian women scientists who were pioneers and trailblazers in their respective fields. I feel like maybe the Prime Minister, because it was through his help and through his encouragement that this book has been facilitated. So the story is kind of funny. I wrote to the Prime Minister about 11 portraits I'd painted of Indian women scientists, and I didn't really expect a response or anything in return. But one day when I came back from school, he had sent a response through the post, and I opened the letter, and it was an amazing letter, just filled with encouragement and filled with, a lot of help and hope for this project. And I think, this project has only been fruitful thanks to his encouragement, and I would really love for him to read what he's made possible. I'd initially only started with painting portraits, and I'd expected it to stop there. But I took those portraits and I went to the Minister, Smriti Irani, and she was very encouraging, and she in fact advised me to write to the Prime Minister. And one thing came after the other, and I ended up going to UNESCO, going to Mr. Eric Falt, and getting a lot of help and encouragement when he took me on, and he really mentored me. And it was really through a lot of help from a lot of different sources that I was able to write this entire book. So the idea was actually, especially for the portraits, born of a tweet that Minister Smriti Irani had written about these 11 pioneering women who had been acknowledged by the government. But when I went through the tweet, I realized that I had never heard of a single woman scientist who was mentioned in all of my school years. And when I went to my friends and I went to my classmates and I asked them, they hadn't heard of these women either. So I kind of decided to make these portraits as a bit of a tribute and an awareness-raising project about these women. But there was just so much positive feedback and so much encouragement that I ended up writing and publishing an entire book. So the first reason is because it tells you a lot about Indian heritage, especially these amazing women, a lot of whom lived during British India and still managed to succeed in the fields of science where women were generally not allowed. The second reason would be to raise awareness, especially about girls and women succeeding in STEM subjects, which is considered slightly hard for women to do. And the third reason would be is because I just did my level best to make this book as entertaining as possible. I included some activities and crosswords and little projects in it. And so I think it would be a fun read for anybody, even if you weren't interested in women of STEM. So I decided early 2020, I was giving my 10th subject choices. I was basically making subject selections for my future years, and I was looking into science and I was trying to find women of science, and I realized that we have very few examples of Indian women of science, which is what inspired me to kind of look for the Twitter post and then make the portrait. I think the first thing you should keep in mind is your first draft is never going to be as good as your final draft. And do not judge the finished work by the first draft or the first idea that you have. And the second point I'd like to keep in mind is just that no one can really do the work the way you do. And so you're not really serving anyone if you're going into the field trying to copy or emulate a certain writer, because you'll have your own style and you'll have your own way of doing things, and I think you should just stay true to that. So I actually didn't end up doing much convincing. I just took the manuscript and mailed it to as many publishers as I could, and HarperCollins happened to respond back, which is how I got this contract.
Maybe reach out to everybody.
Yeah, try, because like if you don't try, the answer is always just going to be no. I think what you should really not do is to try and fit yourself into a mold that's not you. I think you should always try to stay true to yourself and to your inspirations, because like for example, one of my favorite authors is Rick Riordan, Percy Jackson, and for the longest time I used to try and write like him because he has this very funny, quippy, sarcastic way of writing, but I realized that that's not really the tone I would take. And that if I keep trying to copy another writer or another piece of work, I can never really put out what's unique to me, right? So nothing true or unique or a masterpiece would ever come out if I tried to fit myself into someone else's mold. I think the main struggle that I just did not expect was the ideas that seemed really cohesive and really well put together in my head would sometimes just refuse to come out in paper. Because every time you hear about a creative person or an author or an artist, you always hear about the struggle coming up with the idea, but like once they've got the idea, it's just go. Whereas for me, the tough bit was just translating the idea from my head to the written word. And sometimes what I'd come up with would not stay true to the ideal I had in my head. So that's like one struggle that no one ever talks about, is that when you get the idea, how do you transfer it to like a physical medium?